Ahoy, everyone. This is David Perry with my continuing series of interviews with colleagues, friends, and in this case, maritime historians from around the world. He's been my guest before. I've been aboard ship with him many times and looking forward to doing it again. Please welcome into the Zoom room the one and only Mr. Oceanliner himself, Bill Miller.
Hi, David.
So, Bill, a lot of water has passed under the keel since COVID swept over the world now a year ago. And with your network of, as you call them, onboard spies around the world, ships, crew members, officers, passengers, pilots, people around the world are always giving you information that sometimes beats CNN or any of the news outlets. Real quickly, where are we in mid-February 2021 vis-a-vis getting back aboard ship and getting our much, much injured cruise industry back afloat?
Well, just this morning, I heard that MSC and Costa are both resuming in Europe in May. They hope to anyway, and that other lines are beginning to think more seriously in the past week about selling tickets and maybe sticking to the schedule or coming out with new schedules, but getting back to sea. So I'm seeing some light at the end of the keel, so to speak, that things might be picking up and so forth. So I'm very hopeful about this.
Right. And for those people who are not aware of Bill's legacy, you can go and see his many, many books that he has written at billmilleratSea.com, certainly the foremost maritime historian of our time. Bill, when was the last time you were aboard ship?
It was exactly 13 months ago. I was down in South America and I picked up the ship's newspaper, came onto the door, and on page 5 was a little article about a virus in a place called Wuhan in China. And I said to my cabin mate, I said, look at this, a virus. It shut down the city. How terrible. Never another thought. Little did I know, a month later when I got home, the whole thing would begin to churn. And by early March, stop of everything, even going out of the house. So I went from cruising the seas to my next big voyage was to Walmart.
Bill, I have been aboard the SS Bill Miller there in New Jersey, overlooking gorgeous Manhattan. And I know behind you, you have your own fleet of books and boats. And I understand you still move them around occasionally.
Yep, the noontime sailings just occurred.
Bill, how many books do you have under your nautical belt?
I'm probably about 110, 112. So I'm still committed for another 6 or 8, maybe 10. So I'm happy to say that I've got this treasure chest of photos that I'm manic about seeing them used in books. So this is very good for me. And also when I go on ships, particularly ships like the Queen Mary 2, I meet a lot of ex-staff members from the old liners, and they'll sit with me over a cup of coffee or tea and tell me their stories and what it was like. I'm in constant communication, for example, with the man who was the head chef on the old Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth. And he is connected to a lot of ex-Cunard retirees, and they're all filled with stories. It's wonderful. And I've got to get all this down before it's too late.
So now, Bill, before COVID, you spent easily over 200 days a year at sea, correct?
I did. I was working for 4 cruise lines as a guest speaker, and I would rotate the sailings. And fortunately, I've been doing it for over 40 years, lecturing at sea. So they do sort of let me use a little seniority and let me pick the trips I want to go on.
Right, right. So when do you think you'll be back aboard lecturing about the great age of ocean liners aboard a real ship with real water under the keel?
My schedule since last winter has been completely axed, like that of many people. My next trip on the books that hasn't been officially canceled yet is June, followed by September, and then October, November, December. Those trips have not been officially canceled.
Are you able to tell us what ships they are?
I can. June would be Viking. September would be our beloved Crystal, followed by more Viking and then Cunard.
So, Bill, tell us about the vaccination and how is it impacting the cruise industry? First of all, have you been vaccinated? Are you planning to get vaccinated? And how are we going to see crews and passengers vaccinated to get back aboard sea? And will that be a requirement for cruise lines?
Question one is, I'm in a few more days, I'll have vaccine number 2. Yes, people will come back with the vaccines. They will, well, at the moment, the CDC is changing their regulations and mandates by the week, but they're talking now about masks, reduced capacity on board, reduced attendance in showrooms, 3 temperature checks per day. But that being said, to some people would say, well, I don't know if I'll go. But there are people who are just hankering to go. And to give you an example, and I realize it's a little distant, Regent Cruise Lines is offering the longest world cruise in history, 210 days.
Oh, my
January
word.
2023. 98 ports of call, 57 countries. The cruise, which is 700 passengers, was fully booked in 7 hours.
Well, and of course, Bill, I mean, there is no greater adventure to my mind, and I think you'd agree, than a world cruise. I've been on 2.5 of them, and the longest one on board Crystal Symphony was 102 days. This is astounding. Do you think the length of it is a direct result of COVID, that the cruise industry has said, wow, we've got pin-up demand, we're going to make, to mix my metaphors, hay while the sun shines?
I think part of that is right. And I think people are more and more living in assisted living. So it's just a transference of assisted living to go on a cruise for 210 days and then come back to your condo or your, assisted living residence, whatever. It's that kind of extent. And as you know, and as we know, there are a lot of people out there with fairly fat wallets that can afford these kind of voyages. And, to go around the world in the comfort of a Crystal or a Regent cruise when, it's hot and cold running caviar. I mean, what way to live? It's wonderful.
We're speaking with the one and only Mr. Oceanliner, Bill Miller. You can learn more about him and buy some of his wonderful books, of which I have many, at www.billmilleratSea.com. Bill, a lot of the stories I have received from you over the last year on your wonderful and very important and sometimes very emotional and sad COVID and cruising updates that you send to your very potent email list of ship fans around the world has been about the status and the condition of our much beloved crew members. You know that I worked aboard ship for a couple of years, visited 65 countries. I know what it's like to work aboard ship. And for many months, there were hundreds of thousands of crew that had not been repatriated. What is the status now of crew aboard ships right now? Because they're not sailing and not working, with a very few exceptions, I believe, in Asia and Europe.
Almost all of the cruise ship crew have been repatriated. They have maintenance crews. There are 300 ships idle right now, cruise ships, and they need somewhere between 100 and 150 maintenance crew. So they are still working and being rotated periodically. You can't just lock up a ship and leave it. It just doesn't work. It's like a house. It needs some kind of attending care. As far as cargo ships, a lot of those crew members are still stuck at sea in waters in, say, Asia and so forth. They can't get home, which is dreadful. So that part of it is extremely sad. Now, the cruise personnel who have gone home, they are not being paid. So what they have, say, in the Philippines or India to compensate them, I don't know. I don't have that information. It's a kind of an unemployment, but I'm not sure that works in those countries. So how these people are surviving is a story that I'm going to have to wait to find out about when I get back to sea, of how they did live. I may have mentioned in one of our last interviews that one of my favorite stewards on a ship, he was there for years, lovely, smiling, just so wonderful. Well, he got so depressed, not being able to get back to his family and being stuck on the ship. He went down to his cabin and hung himself.
Yes, and so, I have sadly heard of other stories like that, and I know someone as well. There have been more than a few suicides of crew aboard ship who were just in despair, especially the middle of last spring and summer.
Yes, because very often these wonderful people that we so love and are so grateful to, they are not just supporting a wife and children. They might be supporting their parents back home or even their grandparents. And without that money coming in, this is a struggle. Plus the regulations. For example, I remember reading or hearing that the crew members that were sent ashore in the Philippines in Manila then had to face a quarantine ashore, and then there was no sort of local air service to get them home to the various islands of the Philippines to be with their families. So it was very, very depressing. Weak internet, they didn't have access anymore. The contact, all of that is, missing the baby's birthday or the wife's birthday or something. It was all terribly depressing.
Listen, the cruise industry is a huge part of the world economy. In rough numbers, how important is getting cruising back to our planet's economic recovery and the hospitality industry's economic recovery?
It's huge. I can't give you any exact numbers, but cruising as part of travel is a huge part of the world economy. And as you know, cruising is not just about ships. It's about the air connections, the bus drivers, taxis, tour operators, luggage handlers, dockers, the fuel people. All of that's interconnected. And it's like dominoes. One pushes the other one over.
So in our last few minutes, Bill, talk to me, and I know we both like to be optimistic. It's both our personalities.
Yes.
Talk to me optimistically about what you see as changes that will come because of COVID. Not things that will be worse because of COVID, but some things that maybe will be a unexpected silver lining on that horizon for the cruise industry.
Well, the ship will come back. I'm confident of that. We may see initially revised itineraries for shorter voyages. We may see things like you've got to go ashore in a group. You cannot go independently. And the masks and the temperature checks and all of that, changes. There may not be programs under the door anymore. They may be all done through your phone, so as less contact. All that kind of stuff may come through, and I think it will. But people will adjust, as we adjusted after 9/11 to all the airport security. We will adjust to it because we love being on ships so much and traveling, and even if it's just strolling the promenade and inhaling that luscious sea air, we will be back and we'll adjust and we'll just gradually make it back to the way it used to be. Things will return. I'm positive of it.
Bill,
as you know, David, 125 new ships were being built or on order last year. Well, that's dropped back by about 20 to 105. The world's biggest ship, the Wonder of the Seas, the biggest liner ever, is now being finished in France. It'll be delayed by a year for 6,800 passengers. So this is all on the horizon. Bigger and better days will come, and we will be back to cruise travel.
Bill, I know that you are as anxious as I am, so is Alfredo, to get back to sea. And hopefully one of those first voyages, we will all be back on the promenade deck together. Any closing words of advice or hopefulness to your many fans around the world?
My words are, don't pack right away, but get the suitcase off the shelf. We'll be going back soon.
Thank you. Once again, we've been speaking with Mr. Ocean Liner himself, Bill Miller. Check him out at www.billmilleratSea.com. This is David Perry. Ahoy.
Ahoy, David.